Hello and greetings from Asheville, North Carolina. In case my voice is unfamiliar to you, I'm Dr. Han Lai, the founder and current spiritual director of Urban Dharma. Thanks to the wonders of technology, we have been able to share a good number of the programs we have offered the last 6 years in Asheville, and occasionally programs I have done elsewhere with this podcast. I hope you have found these programs educational, informative, and helpful to your own spiritual journey. I want to also take this opportunity to make a personal appeal to you to help us to continue to do what we have been doing here. Urban Dharma North Carolina is entirely 100% volunteer-based. We do not have any employees, and I am neither on the payroll of Urban Dharma, nor do I accept any offerings from the community. Our operating costs are as slim as it can be, but nonetheless, we still need your support and help. So, would you consider either a one-time donation, or better yet, become one of our sustaining members who give on a regular basis so that we can continue to give the gift of Dharma to any and all who need it? If you are ready to help today, please drop us a line at benefactors@udharmanc.com. Again, benefactors@udharmanc.com. Or visit our giving page on our website, www.udharmanc.com. Again, www.udharmanc.com. But if you're not in a position to make a donation today, you can still help us by simply telling someone else about this podcast. Help us reach more people so that we can share the Dharma even more widely than we are currently doing. And finally, thank you, and please enjoy the following teaching brought to you by Urban Dharma, North Carolina.
Hello, and welcome to the Urban Dharma NC podcast. This is part 2 of a series about karma, the Buddha's compassionate explanation of reality, that our thoughts and actions determine our future. Dorje Lopa and Dr. Han Lai will help us unpack this important concept and show how the Buddha's teachings on karma can help us live good and happy lives for ourselves and others, despite a feeling of living in difficult times.
Before we start on the material, this is a PSA. Some warning. So, one of the kind of key elements of the vision of this place, Urban Dharma, is a desire to finance the activities of Urban Dharma differently. Some of you have already heard this before, but I think it's good for us to kind of go back and try to remember this, think about this more, which is that I have been involved in other Buddhist centers in the West, in America, and have seen firsthand the challenges for each group to meet their financial obligations, because unlike churches, there isn't a history, there isn't an endowment to draw from, so the general kind of direction that most Buddhist centers have taken is to basically charge for programs. And And within that kind of charging for programs, there is a spectrum of positions, of practices rather. At one end of the extreme is pretty unapologetically, or they've passed the point of apologizing, is to simply state that the following programs cost this much to participate in. And we have 4 scholarships available for people who really need it. And so that's one model. Then you have the sliding scale model, like seniors and students, and the underemployed is this, and everybody else is this. And then there is the more general kind of suggested donation. And then there is, in a very rare case, of simply having a donation box or passing a basket around. And so across the U.S., you have all these different approaches to kind of finance the place. Places that rely primarily on just passing the basket around or donation box are often ethnic Buddhist places. Buddhist places with a strong ethnic Buddhist community, which for them is church. So they have a family karma, a memory of making donations and supporting. And so then the place can afford to just, put a basket out, put a box out. On the other end of this spectrum are often organizations that are very professional. The one that charges, this is this much, and then we have this much scholarship. And they're very professional places. I mean, like kind of top-notch service, everything is perfect. And they have staff, paid staff to run things. And it's all great, because, like I said, I've been involved in these organizations. I know all the challenges. I would say very few places are actually in it for the money. Even if sometimes it's painful to watch, like to attend this, you need to have $200, otherwise you can't. But even for those places, I get it, like they're serving a different population, so to say. And so we have the whole thing. At Urban Dharma, we are somewhere in the middle with the suggested donation, but we also have something else which is basically membership. But this membership is called sustaining membership, and that is really the reason we chose that language is that it's really based on the public radio, public TV model, which means that whether you're a member or not, actually, you have access to the programs. Yeah? Whether you're a member or not, you have access to the programs. So the sustaining membership program is like these public radio, public TV, is the bulk of support that the place relies on to run the place. And it's based on the trust that when we find something to be important enough for not just ourselves but also for the community, then we will do what we can within our limits and our capacity to support what's going on. And that might mean I go there every week, and then in terms of you're actually taking something from it, it could be that you listen to NPR every day, many hours a day, or you just listen to it once a week or once a day, all of that. But then you support it because you know of the value and the greater good that it is doing. So we have that program. But we still have this thing called suggested donation for certain programs. Not all the programs, but certain programs. And the truth is that I've never been comfortable with even the suggested donation option there. Because it's still there's still sort of a price tag there. Even if, again and again I would say to people, explain that it's really what it means, it's just suggested. But I also know that, never mind, because nobody really wants to kind of stand there and kind of go, I can't. That's not something that, anybody enjoys feeling. And that's not helpful too, in the sense of the bigger picture of cultivating generosity. That's just an obstacle. So it is our intention, at least it is my intention, and the organization, to move towards a completely based on sustaining membership, so that we can even do away with suggested donation. So that in some ways we get the bills out of the way by becoming members, and then by doing your financial planning so that you know that per year this is how much of my resources that I'm going to offer for the bigger picture, for the bigger good. Then any time, right? Any of the programs that I want to go to, I don't have to think about it anymore. Yeah? It's taken care of. And also, the gift that I'm giving to others, that don't have to think about it anymore. Yeah? So here's sort of an announcement, not so much to say, please give us, but to say that we do aspire, like sometime within this calendar year, we can really retire the suggested donation, so that we can be run entirely based on the sustaining membership. And that requires kind of financial planning for each of us. And that's what we plan to do. And we hope that we can get there sooner rather than later. When can we get there? I think we can get there when, of course, nothing is guaranteed, but I think we can get there when we feel sufficiently that, yes, we're getting enough support through the sustaining membership that we can do away with the suggested donation. Then what happens is, like what happens in churches, during programs of service, an offering basket is passed around, and everybody gets it. You put whatever you want to put, or you don't put anything. It's fine, because the basic obligations that the church, the place has, is met already. Whatever else that comes in more just allows us to do more. Yeah. So please think about this. It's really helpful to us to have this kind of reliable, and then it's easier for us to plan things as well. A little bit more is that currently I am on the payroll of the organization, but if plans go according to what we are working on, soon I'm out of that picture as well, so that I'm not on payroll. I'm finding ways to be financially independent of the place. If you want details, I'll fill you in, but it's just complicated. So you can talk to me. You can talk to a couple of other people. Our president, May, over here, Vice President Judy over here, and some of the other board members and some of the other members that are doing a lot of work to keep this place doing what we do here.
But you're not going anywhere.
Right.
Whenever the big one.
That's the plan. Yes.
This year.
Well, No, I will continue to do what I do here, except to do it as a volunteer. I know some of you, if you're following what I'm saying, you're like, wait, how does this add up? And there's a backstory which is not secret, it's public, but you just need to talk to us. Then we'll tell you what's going on. And by me not being on payroll doesn't mean suddenly there'll be a lot of money. There's a complicated right. There's a complicated arrangement that we are sorting through. The short version of it is currently Urban Dharma has a very heavy debt, a debt that we don't think it can carry. So we are in the process of transferring that debt to me personally. So there are other pieces to that. No monkey business going on. You can talk to any of them, and they can explain it easily to you. But it means we're entering into a next stage of our development where, in some ways, it will free up the place to really focus on what we can do best. But in other ways, it also means that we are hoping and counting on the community. So this is when we were planning Urban Dharma, one of the kind of cute phrases we were using is that it's going to be a CSD. Yeah. Community, supported Dharma. And so we'll give you a box of Dharma each week. And if you have too much of that, you can give to other people. If you don't know what to do with beats, then someone else will be quite happy to have your beats.
Dr. Wood,
Yes.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the sustaining memberships,
Mm-hmm.
is there like an average? I've been out of the loop for a
Mm-hmm.
while, Is there a average amount per individual, or?
Good question. Thank you. Like the public radio, public TV, it's anything you want to do.
Anything? Are there the levels or no?
There are no levels.
Right.
Can I get a T-shirt?
I probably have an extra T-shirt in my house. Sure.
Bumper stickers.
Yeah, well, we have bumper
stickers.
We do have some bumper stickers.
Free bumper stickers.
But the bumper sticker, I don't know. You might find it to be a little bit too much of my kind of humor.
You should offer several of them, right?
Right. There's one that says, the only one that we have now is, it says, not all who wander are lost, but I am. It's the anti-Asheville bumper sticker.
The whole back of the
So literally we have someone, who is a sustaining member by giving $1 a month. And that's what they know they can do. That's good, And then we have, people who say, I'm giving $100 a month. And then there are people who say, I'm giving, $25 a month, or $20 a month, or $5 a month, or $8 a month. It's all over the map, really. And the way I think most people are doing it is to get their bank to send us these automatic checks that comes in, sent to Urban Dharma, the address here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the best way.
Right, that's really the best way. I mean, you could also do it through PayPal. Of course, they get a cut of it, which is what we have set up on our website. But the best way is just to get your bank to send us these automatic checks.
Yeah, I can put checks in donation box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could also every month just write it.
That's the way I do it.
So, now, coming back to the material. One more thing to point out. So this topic of karma, and I would say, offering this program, then, I will state very clearly that I think it is at the very heart of the Buddha's teachings. In response to those who say that, karma, that's just something that was culturally, powerful, and so the Buddha just kind of picked that up, or the Buddha didn't really mean it, all of that. I will say that that's not the case. That at the center of the Buddha's teachings is really this teaching on karma. And that it is not something that is things that we can just pick and choose. Of course, ultimately we can pick and choose, no one's forcing you to follow the Buddha's way. But just to say that one of the most important, the most centrally sort of animating the whole tradition is the focus on karma. Because if we don't get that, then all the other things that is, kind of taught by the Buddha loses their significance or their context. Yeah. So, and I will try to make a case for that. And so we will begin by looking at some of the earliest written records that we have on what the Buddha taught. And mainly because many of these texts have been translated from Pali. Remember, one of the two Indic canonical languages, Sanskrit and Pali. So a lot of Sanskrit texts don't survive in Sanskrit. They survive, some of them in the Sanskrit form, but most of them translated into Chinese or Tibetan. And those texts have not been so extensively translated compared to the Pali text. The Pali text is a smaller collection, but they represent some of the earliest layers of the Buddha's teachings. Some of the earliest layers also survive in the Sanskrit and now existing only in Tibetan or in Chinese. But those texts, again, have not been translated into English, as many of them. So the single largest collection of these early texts that have been translated into English comes from the Pali language, from the Pali canon. And the Pali canon is the authoritative body of scriptures for Buddhists in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, what we know as Theravada Buddhism. Yeah. And the excerpts that I have collected here, and you have a copy. I'm sorry we didn't make enough. You always don't know how many to make. These are taken from a website. If you want to write it down, it's called Access to Insight. ACCESS, Access to Insight. .org. One word, access to insight.org. And in fact, the owner of the site and the person responsible for much, if not all, of its contents, and it's unbelievable how much there is in there, is an American monk, a very senior American monk in the Thai forest tradition. And he has all these study guides that he has compiled for different key topics. And in fact, much of what I have taken and kind of excerpt to put in here comes from one study guide he prepared for the topic of karma. And so if you want like more material to look at, that's a good place to go look at it. So what we're going to do now is to look at some of the different positions that the Buddha was aware of and actually addressed. Positions with regards to why things happen. Why things happen. And this is because the topic of karma is essentially asking the question of not just why things happen, of course, but when we understand why things happen, then we know how we can or cannot act with good reasons for certain expectations and what are ridiculous expectations, given why things happen. So we can say that. So let's look at this very first, called what I just called the three positions, the three general kind of options out there for explaining why things happen. And I think if you think about it, actually these three reasons, even though this is like 6th century BC, I think basically it covers the positions that we might fall onto when we think about why things happen. Especially, I think, when unpleasant things happen. And unpleasant things happen in a big scale. Right? That is when we collectively ask, why did that happen? Right? So, let's think about natural disaster. What's the big one? The most recent big one, natural disaster. Where? Give one recent one that everyone is like, yes.
Nepal.
What happened in Nepal? The earthquake. Right? 2 years ago. What happened in Nepal? Right? So then, we ask, why did that happen? So what are some possible things that you have heard people say? God's will is one, right? And with the understanding of what? God is up to what? It's God's will. Punishing people, yes.
Geological conditions.
Geological conditions might explain how, I think, but not quite why. Because why is a bigger question of meaning. How is a question of logistics. So even those who say it's God's will get it. That, that's rubbing against, all of that, right? Some of them might not believe. The same people who said, no proof that we were on the moon.
Arctic ice and the temperature of the waters is...
That's still a how question, which I think scientifically...
Well, but if we don't take care of the environment and we've gotten it to melt these chunks, it's just making it...
Well, the fracking that goes on out west in Oklahoma causes the earth.
See, they're talking about unnatural events. You're talking about a natural event.
What about the flood?
But ontologically, yes, that would be a good word. Like, what are some other things that people might say?
Well, there is the perspective, the existential perspective. That
Okay.
There isn't really a why. That the how is the why.
Yes. So the how is the why. Yes. Yeah. So that's a why answer. An answer to the why, which is
So,
the how itself is the why. No other reason. Yeah, you can't ask why. Yeah.
so at least a collective karma.
So there is the idea of collective karma, and however, whatever that means, we hopefully will get some idea, right? Yeah.
And then there's the idea that there's a lesson in everything challenging.
Oh
that
yes,
happens to us.
right. That there is a lesson to be learned. That somehow there is a intelligent and benevolent universe. Whatever, aside from the word God, right? That everything happens for a reason, right? There's also that, right?
And then there's everything just happens randomly. There's no.
And everything happens randomly, right? A variation of the
And
position.
the bumper sticker SHIT shit happens.
Yes, right? Shit happens.
Geologic conditions.
In terms of like damage and suffering, that in terms of like damage and suffering of the event, because is that construction was not up to code because of governmental corruption, not letting people like have the proper materials, so things are built quickly. So things that had a lot of money didn't get
Yeah.
damaged. And,
Nonetheless,
yeah.
why?
Why?
Why is it that you were born there with that kind of, lack of code, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right? So those are like bigger kind of existential questions. Right? Like, why? Why? So here, the Buddha actually kind of says, so let's look at here. It says, monks, there are these 3 sectarian guilds, meaning groups, that, when cross-examined, pressed for reasons, and rebuked by wise people. So here we know they're wrong, right? Because they've been rebuked by wise people. Even though they may explain otherwise, they remain stuck in the doctrine of inactivity. What do you understand by this?
One more time.
Monks, there are these 3 sectarian guilds, these 3 groups, when cross-examined, pressed for reasons, and rebuked by wise people, even though they may explain otherwise, really in their heart, they remain stuck in the doctrine of inactivity. Or simply they remain stuck in inactivity. Which 3? So what can we say about anything in this opening statement? Anything interesting at all, or any questions?
think
What
that-
go ahead. There you go.
I think like he's already pointing out they're irrational positions, because even when you logically
Right.
take their position apart, they're still clinging on to it. They're
Yes.
still going to hold that way.
Yes, they're going to hold it that way, right?
It also implies that we can't do anything about it. There's
So
inactivity.
that's an important word there. I mean, the Buddha could criticize this or that idea for all kinds of reasons. But here, it shows us what he's concerned about. What is he concerned about? What is he concerned about? Inactivity. What does it mean, inactivity? In this context.
You're not involved with what's happening.
Sorry?
You're not involved with what's happening. You're
You have
observer.
no control over your actions.
You
Or
feel.
have no control
You
over
feel.
your outcome.
You feel.
that you done.
You believe that it does not matter. You believe that actions don't matter. See, to me, this is more telling than the criticism that will come after. Like the criticism of those three positions, they're good. But I think it's more important to understand that fundamentally he's concerned that we get stuck in, we get paralyzed, or we get paralyzed, we get normalized, we get discouraged, we get falsely assured, all of that, however you think of that, in inactivity. That means not acting. That means not engaging karma skillfully. So this is an important word with regards to the Buddhist understanding of karma, which is to teach about karma is to show us skillful ways of acting. Skillful means that you can improve it, that it can be cultivated. It means that it can be improved, it can be cultivated, it can be habit forming. And then you can get good at it. That at the beginning it might feel awkward. That at the beginning it might feel clumsy. But when you go back to it again and again, you get good at it. Now, what are the three positions that he talks about here? He says, there are Brahmins and contemplatives. Brahmins are basically then, in the Indian context, religious people. And contemplatives are those who... Brahmins are religious people by class. Contemplatives are those who, by choice, you could say, step out and say, I'm going to dedicate my life to spirituality. So there are Brahmins and contemplatives who hold this teaching, hold this view. Whatever a person experiences, pleasant, painful, or neither pleasant nor painful, that is all caused by what was done in the past. There are Brahmins and contemplatives who hold this teaching, hold this view. Whatever a person experiences, pleasant, painful, or neither pleasant nor painful, that is all caused by a supreme being's act of creation. There are Brahmins and contemplatives who hold this teaching, hold this view. Whatever a person experiences, pleasant, painful, neither pleasant nor painful, that is all without cause and without condition. So the first one is a certain kind of understanding of karma. The second one is basically a theistic, a God-based understanding of why things happen. And the third is the various form, existential, materialist, whatever. That basically, here causes and condition it's not talking again about the mechanics of, the building was badly built and those idiots were fracking over there and this caused this. Causes and conditions in the sense of moral causes and conditions. So the answer is basically bad luck. Right? Yes, there are forces at work, but bad luck. As a sufficient answer.
And according to him, subscribing to any of these three leads to inaction. Now, of course, I think you could say, well, not necessarily. Perhaps not necessarily. But for now, let's entertain this. Yeah, let's entertain this. Why is it that if you believe that everything you experience is caused by what was done in the past, then it will lead to then why bother? Can we see that? Right? If everything in the past is already decided, then why bother? Right? Let's party, or even worse, let's suffer. Let's continue to be stuck in these miserable conditions because this is all things that I've done in the past. I just have to endure it now. Yeah? So both. And he finds that problematic. The second one is a supreme being's act of creation. Everything is caused by an all-powerful other. Now, of course, lots of people who believe in God, or Goddess, or universe, are doing a lot of good work, acting and changing the world. So I don't think we should apply this as a blanket to. But he is pointing out that if you have that particular view, that God is in charge, which there are people who believe that, right? Why do anything about the environment? That's silly. God is in charge. And he says, if you adopt that, then it leads to inactivity. And the third one is basically saying, there is no correlation between my actions and what's going on out there. So this is a variant of those who say, yes, global warming is happening, but it has nothing to do with human actions. It just is, What do we know? Would be a variant of that. There's no point. So again, he was most concerned with the idea that is pointless. Now, of course, to be clear, right, when he's talking to these people at this time, complex issues like climate change and all of that wasn't in the forefront. Yeah, he's specifically talking to people who have Brahmins and contemplatives, people who are tending to their inner lives. So we have to understand that context and not overextend. We can come up with some conclusions to help us figure out what we should do in the face of climate change, in the face of corruption, all of that. But we have to be sensitive to the original context of this so that we know what take-home lesson to take and not come up with the wrong lesson and then apply it to our situation, our conditions. Yeah? So primarily here he's talking to people who are committed to a religious life, a contemplative life, that they're committed to that. But he says, if you're committed to the religious life, to the contemplative life, to the spiritual life, it makes no sense to believe in any of those three positions. See, he's not talking about society at large. People who are just going about living their lives. He's talking about if you have a committed to the religious life or the spiritual life, holding these three positions are not going to help. So next part. then in that case, so here he draws out the kind of the consequence of believing those three positions. Then in that case, a person is a killer of living beings because of what was done in the past. A person is a thief, unchaste, a liar, a divisive speaker, an abusive speaker, an idle chatterer, covetous, malevolent, a holder of wrong views. This is the list of the 10 non-virtues. That means you engage in what we call the 10 non-virtues because of what happened in the past. When one falls back on what was done in the past as being essential, then monks, there is no desire, no effort at the thought, this should be done, this shouldn't be done. When one can't pin down as a truth or reality what should and shouldn't be done, one dwells bewildered and unprotected. One cannot righteously refer to oneself as a contemplative. And so this is applied to, if you believe that everything that happens is caused by an external, all-powerful being, then you will be stuck in that state. And if you believe that it doesn't matter, there's no correlation between causes and effects, then that is what will happen. So it makes me think, right? The times where this is not logical. This is actually kind of emotional stuff. The times whereby your emotions conspire for you to feel that the situation cannot change because of something that happened in the past. And now, I just have to suffer. And there's nothing to do. Then you're defeated and you fall victim to it. And so we might not, walk around subscribing to any of these beliefs, but emotionally, these beliefs take over. Then the opposite position, which is, this has nothing to do with me. As well, in the sense of, I can't do anything about it, so I will just suffer through it. That's the third position. When one can't pin down as a truth or reality what should or shouldn't be done, then you become bewildered and unprotected.
A former congressman from Kansas is facing backlash or criticizing
It's unstickable.
Yes.
That was another teacher.
So the Buddha rejected these three positions. The first one is the simplistic understanding of karma. The second is this understanding that, there is someone else in charge and we don't need to worry about it. And the third one is simply, there's nothing we can do.
And all of them are non-action.
And all of them leads to, right?
Nothing.
Yeah. Being bewildered and being confused and then stuck essentially with the problem.
And they
Yes.
all prevail yet 26 centuries later.
Yes, 26th century later, it's still around.
So the first one, how's that? I'm stuck on it because how is it different saying that from saying like, okay, if things are caused by the past, like these bad things, I should do positive actions now so I can have good results in the future.
The choice to do good things now seems to be a new choice. And if everything that we experience now is the result of past, that choice won't come up. Because everything is bad right now. Yeah, we will see. Because, of course, you're asking of that question, reveals that, maybe you have a Buddhist bias, that you kind of believe in karma. And that's sort of like karma, but actually the Buddha says to believe that everything you experience is all caused by what was done in the past. So he has a different view on karma.
Well, is that different from saying that all actions have consequences?
Say that, how? Say more.
If all actions have consequences, which we have talked about, then on some level it does appear that what happened in the past, everything that has happened, that is happening now, has been a result of actions that we have performed somewhere. It may be yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, is there a nuance here I'm missing?
Here he is criticizing the idea that everything that we experience now is the result of the past. Okay, if you think about that, right, then you will say, then I will just wait for what kind of what stirs up in me to do next, because that is just all the past happening.
Well, that assumes you think there's no future.
No.
Not that there's no future.
Or that what I do now has no bearing on the future.
But what you do now, if what you do now is still because of the past.
Okay, so you're stuck.
So you're stuck.
So there's no free will.
There's no free will,
No choice.
basically, yes.
Okay.
That it takes free will out of the picture. Yeah, so a rigid understanding of how karma works, a rigid understanding of God. Of course, like God-based systems struggle with the question of free will. Right? If God already knows everything, is there any free will? Well, I guess the Calvinist says, yeah, no. God has already decided who is saved and who is condemned.
Predestination.
Yeah, predestination. That's the logical, conclusion to that. But somehow, I think if you do enough theological somersaults, you can still act and do good in the world. Which, for sure, Presbyterians do a lot of good in the world. But they are inheritors of predestination. And it's just beyond me, the gymnastics that you have to do there. But, my religious studies background tells me that, yeah, that's why it's interesting. I talked about how I said, I used to spend all my time thinking of things that are, kind of unimportant. And it's point of pride. Like, why would you want to think about important things? Other people should think about that, But yeah, it's like a rigid adherence to that. There's no free will in this picture anymore. Yes?
So are we to assume that we can change the effects of past actions?
It's coming. It's coming. It's very interesting. Yeah. It's really very interesting. Like, you see, one of the interesting things. Okay, here, in another place, the Buddha says, here are the 4 imponderables. Yeah. Don't worry about writing it down because they're imponderables. So you should not ponder upon them too much. It says the Buddha range of the Buddhas. The Buddha range of the Buddhas. That means the extent, the range of those who are free and awakened. There's no way you can even think of how free being free means. So that's an imponderable. And more, like, see, you can think of it. That's not it. See, so it's imponderable. And then it actually in that discourse, the Buddha says, and if you insist on thinking about that, it will probably drive you nuts. It'll make you go crazy. He said that. That's the first one. Then the second one, he says the range, again, the extent of meditative concentration. So meaning you can only experience it. You can't talk about it. You can't think about it. You have no idea the stillness that can come when you're absorbed in the state of meditative stillness. So that's the second. And the third is speculation about the origin of the cosmos. It says that's an imponderable. Because whatever they say is the origin, right? It's just a convenient point. You're just deciding, okay, I'm not going to ask anymore, right? I mean, you say Big Bang. Okay, well, what was before that? Then small bang. What was before that? 2 bangs. What was before that? Right? It's just like it will make you crazy, Or it will get you good grants. The fourth one is the precise working out of karma. Exactly how this act is related to this effect. It says it's imponderable. It'll make you crazy. But we hope not to do that here. Right? And that is actually good to think about why it is imponderable. Because, see, the view of karma that he criticizes is the view that views karma in a linear way. That it just goes like that. But karma, in the Buddhist understanding of karma, which is different from his contemporaries, because there were people who believe like that. And fact of the matter, there are Buddhists, or we should say most run-of-the-mill Buddhists, not like you, very educated. Most run-of-the-mill Buddhists have this kind of rather immature view of karma, which is that, if you got stabbed by someone now, well, because in the past you stabbed someone else, and not just that, but you stabbed that person with a 6-inch blade, which now explains the 6-inch blade that you were stabbed with. But the Buddha said, no, it doesn't work like that. There are some certainties about karma, and we can look at those qualities of certainty of karma that the Buddha says, no, that is certain. It doesn't change. those things. But as to how exactly a particular effect that is being experienced now is exactly related to a particular cause is beyond all of us. Because causes and conditions are constantly at play, which makes it a very dynamic situation, karma, that at any moment something else might happen, or some cause could be created to kind of divert the result of certain kind of events that are to happen. There is no way to completely fathom all the different mixes and all the contingencies that can come up. And here, for those of you who know these things, is related to the understanding on shunyata, on emptiness. Emptiness of inherent existence means contingency. Contingency means at any moment something else can be done, or something else might ripen. Two things. Old karma might intervene. New karma could be created to block that. So it's always very dynamic.
But you can't contemplate how that's going to happen.
Yes. You cannot contemplate how that's going to happen. Because if you contemplate, that means you're pondering about and you don't act.
What?
You don't act. Now, when you act, you have to act skillfully. Not react based on false views. React based on the poisons of ill will, of retaliation, of jealousy. So the question of karma then relates to what drives our actions. And so later Buddha actually qualifies his understanding of karma. He says karma, which is action, right? He defines it as intention. He says karma is intention. Intent. And we'll look at that. Now let's look at the 6 theories. I won't spend too much time on that, but just to give you an idea of the range of ideas that were circulating in his time among religious, spiritual types. We know that these spiritual teachers were real people. So this early text actually gives us all these 6 different positions. The first theory by Purana Kassapa said to me, so this is in relation to, this is actually the Buddha having a conversation with one of his questioners who is a king. And so the king relates to the Buddha. I have heard so and so. You see, one of the favorite pastimes of kings, this is one instance where it makes me long for kings. Just one instance, very few other instances. That many kings spend their leisurely time summoning religious figures to their courts and say, tell me what you believe. Then for their entertainment, sometimes they get both and say, okay, now debate each other. That was their entertainment, And how wonderful, Now, okay, we won't go into now. What kings are doing. Yeah, so this king, he had a great interest in these subjects, and I don't think he was the only king. Many other kings, were deep thinkers and always curious about, the latest ideas of their time. So this king, he says. So the king said, Purana Kashyapa, this one spiritual figure, said to me, Great king, in acting or getting others to act, in mutilating or getting others to mutilate, in torturing or getting others to torture, in inflicting sorrow or getting others to inflict sorrow, in tormenting or getting others to torment, I think he's trying to say something to this king. Breaking into houses, plundering wealth, committing burglary, ambushing highways, committing adultery, speaking falsehood, one does no evil. Oh yeah. If with a razor-edged disc one were to turn all the living beings of this earth to a single heap of flesh, a single pile of flesh, there would be no evil from that cause, no coming of evil either. Even if one were to go along the right bank of the Ganges, killing and getting others killed, mutilating, there would be no evil from that cause, no coming of evil, meaning no consequence. Okay, here, right, when they talk about consequence, they're not talking about the effect of people being killed. They are talking about no bad things will happen to you.
Now.
No, yes, to you now or later.
Forever?
Or ever. Because often I say, when we talk about cause and effect, I think we get confused with two different types of effects. Right? Whenever we talk about karma, whether the correct view of karma or the wrong view of karma, it's not saying that, so for example, if I walk up and punch you in the face, Judy, along the lines of these examples, but a less example, if I come up and punch Judy in the face, the karmic effect is not Judy feeling pain. That's not karmic effect. That's the effect of me assaulting her. Karmic effect is, when am I going to get punched? Or what sort of bad things will happen to me? Or perhaps good things. If your idea of karma is somewhat, perverse. Yeah, that's the effect that we're talking about. Okay, so when it says no evil coming, he's not talking about, no evil as in nobody has been harmed. He's saying that there's no karmic effect that will come. Okay? So there was someone teaching that during the Buddha's time. Through generosity, self-control, restraint, and truthful speech, there is no merit from that cause and no coming of merit. So no good or bad will come to you, no matter what you do. Thus, when asked about a fruit of the contemplative life, visible here and now, Purana Kashyapa answered with non-action. Now, again, to speak on behalf of Purana Kashyapa, you can see that he is using very extreme examples to make a point. But it seems like his form of spirituality is not saying, yeah, go ahead. Go out and slice all the people on the left bank or the right bank of the river. Or don't cultivate generosity, self-control, restraint, or truthful speech. But this seems to be remember that these are not random beliefs that people have. These are associated with actual spiritual communities of the Buddha's time. Yeah? So then you can say, what? What kind of spirituality is this? Can you imagine what kind of spirituality is this? I mean, can you think of how this might work? Then what's the point? I mean, if you want to be speaking in defense of Purana Kashyapa?
Well, there's not really any. Just gives him reason to just do whatever it feels like.
Yeah, but if it is a spiritual tradition, it probably doesn't mean just going around pillaging or... So I'm trying to get us to imagine. So what would this spiritual community look like as a practice?
Probably really focused on, some type of meditation that's really kind of not a Buddhist understanding of emptiness, but it's kind of just this empty, not really experiencing anything, not really doing anything.
Yeah, and with regards to action, what does it mean? What could this mean to believe in non-action? Any thoughts?
Don't get hampered by expectation.
Yes, don't get hampered by expectations. But with regards to action, maybe not literally non-action, but rather...
Non-skillful?
No. You advocate non-skillful? No one would say, act non-skillfully, that's good.
Non-reaction?
I think it is talking about a naturalistic attitude. A naturalistic attitude. A naturalist, extreme naturalist form of spiritual life. Which says that moral good and bad are just human impositions. Just be natural. And if it means killing someone, well, do it. It's not saying that you go kill someone either, because that would be trying to do something. You see?
So is it, would you say then it's like an expression of being beyond the bounds of being human? I'm not...
Yeah, almost.
Okay.
Because saying that these are just human impositions, so we should be naturalistic. Okay. Just like tigers don't think.
Right, they just are.
They just are. They just kill. Yeah, they don't philosophize. They don't think in terms of good and bad.
Am I a tiger? Am I a lion?
Right. Am I a tiger? Am I a lion? When can I train to be a rabbit? Right? So I think it's that kind of spirituality. Yeah, that says just, these are all human categories. And we have to transcend these. Yeah, so it's sort of related like the emptiness. The idea of these don't matter. We want to get beyond this. And then now I think, at least for me, I can see, that could be an attractive form of spirituality, right? I mean, some of us probably have some of that. Sometimes, when human society gets too crazy, we think, I'll just go into the forest and be one with the forest. But the Buddha criticized that and said, no. So it's a form of, I would say, escapism. It's a form of escapism. Next, purification through wandering on. Makali Goshala said to me, "Great king, there is no cause, no requisite condition for the defilement of beings. Beings are defiled without cause, without requisite condition. There is no cause, no requisite condition." Of course, cause and condition are Buddhist vocabulary. Right? So in saying no to these, right, it's also telling us what the Buddha might be saying later. Right? There's no cause, no requisite condition for the purification of beings. So neither being defiled nor being pure has any causes and conditions. Which then now means nothing you can do. Nothing you can do about this. Right? You can't create the causes, you can't provide the conditions for either purification or defilement. Then further, there's nothing self-caused, nothing other caused, nothing human caused. There is no strength, no effort, no human energy, no human endeavor. Not literally, but none of this can make any real effect, according to this view. Subject to the changes of fate, serendipity, and nature, they are sensitive to pleasure and pain in the 6 great classes of birth. So they actually believe in rebirth in many life forms. But they say, but according to this teacher, he says, the experience of pain and pleasure is plainly due to the changes of fate, serendipity, and nature. It's all just natural processes. So, like, no rhyme or reason, but you have a body, because you have a human body, and a human body is susceptible to cold and heat that is bearable within this range. And there's no other reason, don't think about it, that you are now outside and there's a snowstorm. And you're naked. That's just how it's all. Then he goes on, and this gets very interesting. I'm not going to read all of it, but there are 1,406,600 principal modes of origin. There are 500 kinds of karma, 5 kinds and 3 kinds, full karma and half karma. There are 62 pathways, 62 sub-eons, 6 great classes of birth, 8 classes of men, 4,900 modes of livelihood, 4,900 kinds of wanderers, and so on and so forth. Right? Down to 700 major dreams, 700 minor dreams, 84,000 great eons. Having transmigrated and wandered on through these, the wise and the foolish alike will put an end to pain. Though one might think, through this morality, this practice, this austerity, or this holy life, I will ripen unripened karma and eliminate ripened karma whenever touched by it. So this, you can say, is close to the Buddhist view. But they reject. They say, that is impossible. Why? Because pleasure and pain are measured out. Fated already. How much pleasure and pain each of us will have has been measured out.
And is this person making fun by going through all those 4,900 kinds of wanderers?
No, that is the way they categorize all the possible ways of rebirth and types of rebirth. And that whole list is saying that for all of us, there is a natural kind of process we all have to go through. Yeah? So let's continue here. Has been measured out, and the wandering on is fixed in its limits. So there is a fixed number of lifetimes that we all have to go through. There is no shortening or lengthening, no accelerating or decelerating. Just as a ball of string, when thrown, comes to its end simply by unwinding, in the same way, having transmigrated and wandered on, the wise and the foolish alike will put an end to pain. Thus, when asked about a fruit of the contemplative life here and visible here and now, Makali Gosala answered with purification through wandering on. Wandering on there means
Wandering up.
Finishing all your rebirths. So according to this form of spirituality, we all have been allotted a number of rebirths, a number of, you could say, evolutionary cycles, until when it's completely evolved, then we're all free. So to them, what is a problem? A problem is trying to do what? Trying to change things, trying to speed it up.
Well, if you believe this, then you would have believed that at some point everybody would be evolved.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But that's clearly not true.
Why? They've evolved and they've proved. that they're not here. Haha. They say it's not true for you. Your process is not finished yet. You see? Ha ha. Yeah. So again, this is kind of an interesting, right? It's saying that everything is just so. Instead, they say the more you fight against it, the more you're bringing pain to yourself. So why fight it? Pain, pleasure, born as this, born as that. That's okay. Just keep going. Like a ball of string, it says that you unfurl. Eventually, it will straighten out, and that's it. Again, it's a form of a passive attitude of spirituality. Well, we're in Nashville. Just chill, Like why fight? Why fight it? Just chill.
Just go with the flow, man.
Yeah, go with the flow. Yeah, right. You're trying too hard. Now, of course, if you try too hard, Buddha will say that is unskillful action, but inaction. It troubles him. He says, no. This is a mistaken view. Annihilation is the next. Ajita Kesakambalin said to me, Great King, there is nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed. There is no fruit or result of good and bad actions. There is no this world, no next world, no mother, no father, no spontaneously reborn beings, no Brahmins or contemplatives who, faring rightly and practicing rightly, proclaim this world and the next after having directly known or realized it for themselves. So here, a person is a composite of 4 primary elements: earth, fire, wind, and water. The physical constituents. At death, the earth in the body returns to and merges with the external earth substance. Fire returns to and merges with the external fire substance. Liquid returns to and merges with external liquid substance. Wind returns to and merges with the external wind substance. The sense faculties scatter into space. 4 men with the bier as the 5th carry the corpse. Its eulogies are sounded only as far as the charnel ground. The bones turn into pigeon-colored. The offerings end in ashes. Generosity is taught by idiots. The words of those who speak of existence after death are false, empty chatter. With the breaking up of the body, the wise and the foolish alike are annihilated, destroyed. They do not exist after death. Thus, when asked about a fruit of the contemplative life, visible here and now, Ajita Kesakambalin answered with annihilation. The fruit meaning the goal. So the goal is to live out your life, and that's it. Again, this is a form of spirituality. I know some people who believe this. They even think they're Buddhist. No, really. The idea that, after this life, all the elements go back to the elements and everything is done and then finished. Buddha says...
What would be the point of living a good life then?
Because now, you don't want SHIT.
If you can get away with it, why not do it? I mean, there's no reason to... There's no consequence.
Yeah, but...
He doesn't say there's suffering.
Right, he doesn't say that. What he's saying is that ultimately, it doesn't matter. Yeah? So ultimately, it doesn't matter. In fact, according to this view, it's like... So this kind of spirituality basically says at death, everything is over.
Sounds pretty Christian.
Hmm?
Sounds pretty Christian.
No, there's judgment by God.
It's more realistic.
Yeah, it's materialist. It's a materialist view of the world. That everything just returns, but it has a spiritual tone to it. Like I said, I know people who believe they are Buddhists and believe that this is the Buddhist view. That all the elements kind of return to the elements. And then the good life is basically, well, be a good person. People will remember you, and that's good. Ta-da. Now, again, like I think I was guilty of what I'm going to criticize now. We kind of, it's easy to kind of say, these are kind of silly. But I think it's also good to see the power of these arguments and how they might be attractive. And then if we see maybe they're attractive to us because we have the wrong questions. Yeah, going back to maybe it's not the answers that we're looking for, but we have to reframe these questions. Like some of this can be attractive. I think this view, Buddhists or not, all of us have many friends who actually subscribe to this. If not ourselves, subscribe to this. And I would say culturally, based on our cultural context, some of us are so turned off by mainstream religions talk about what it means after this, that this is an attractive alternative, as opposed to a God that will judge and all of that. Like, sign me up on this one. Right? Because of our context, I think. Like I can see all first, the first three. The second one requires that you actually believe in multiple lifetimes. This one is very modern.
Straight to the point.
Yeah, very modern, right? It doesn't require you to believe in past lifetime, future lifetimes. Its eulogies are sounded only as far as the charnel ground. Actually, this would probably means, don't be so concerned about your reputation. Beyond that eulogy that will be said at your funeral, poof, that's it, nobody remembers. Generosity is taught by idiots. The words of those who speak of existence after death are false, empty chatter. With the breakup of the body, the wise and foolish alike are annihilated, destroyed. Or as a friend of mine said, in a different way, we all taste the same to maggots. Next, non-relatedness. Pakutta Kaccayana said to me, "Great king, there are these 7 substances." So here is some, theory about the building blocks. Unmade, irreducible, uncreated, without a creator, barren, stable as a mountain peak, standing firm like a pillar. And these 7 substances, they do not alter, do not change, do not interfere with one another, are incapable of causing one another pleasure, pain, or both pleasure and pain. Which 7... Oh, wait, so those are not the 7. But those are the quality of these 7 substances. The earth substance, the liquid substance, the fire substance, the wind substance, pleasure, pain, and the soul. These are the 7 substances. And among them there is no killer, nor one who causes killing, no hearer, nor one who has causes hearing, no cognizer, nor one who causes cognition. When one cuts off another person's head, there is no one taking another one's life. It is simply between the 7 substances that the sword passes. Thus, when asked about the fruit of the contemplative life here and now, Pakutta Kaccayana answered with non-relatedness. So here is a form of spirituality that divides everything into these 7 essences. And it says, so what is like all that we see here, you and me and everything? Just particular combinations of 7 substances. And here, there is a substance called soul. Yeah, so it's not just the physical substances, like earth, water, fire, and wind. Those are the four. Then pleasure and pain. So they acknowledge that we go through life having experiences of pleasure and pain. But then they say, these are not actually experiences. These are basically essences. And when the essences turn up, then we experience pleasure. And when the essence of pain turns up, then we experience pain. And then there is the soul, which is unrelated. So these 7 things, they might be bundled together, but they're unrelated ultimately. And when you cut a sword through someone, you're not killing anyone. Because the soul cannot be killed. Earth cannot be killed. Water cannot be killed. So there are views like that. Spiritual views that, you don't kill anyone. It's just an illusion. Again, extreme examples is used, even by, I think, like Pakuta Kachayana. It's not, I think, not necessarily Buddhist putting words in his mouth, like using extreme examples. I can see how even he might say, even something as heinous as killing. I'm sure none of these groups are advocating go out and kill. But it's using this example. You have to understand, you have to get it, right? That no one is being killed. So be free from that. Now, I would say, particular understandings of Zen, for example, made Zen very welcome by the samurai class of Japan. Because it made them fearless. They say there's no killing. Only the sword. When you become one with your sword, you cut through everything.
So there's no morality involved in that.
If you have this kind of higher understanding. And I'm not singling Zen out. I'm giving a Buddhist example of how even some Buddhists can. And here, if you want to read more, during the Second World War, almost all Japanese Buddhist traditions signed on to the government's war propaganda. Now, there are many reasons. The Buddhists had just suffered, a long period of persecution by the government, being accused of being unpatriotic, being accused of being, detrimental to the national good. And so the Buddhists felt that they needed to prove that they're, worthy citizens. Very complex. All I'm saying is that a particular understanding or misunderstanding, because this bears some resemblance, except for the soul element. In Buddhist, the way Buddha talks about it, he says, what is this? This is mind and body. Here. So-called the 5 skandhas, if you're familiar with that. The physical skandha or aggregate is divided into the 4 elements. Then the other 4 skandhas are 4 mental emotional processes. And that all that we can account for here is this combination of psychophysical processes. Buddha did teach that, But again, Buddhists who just take that and yank it out of the context of also teachings about wandering in the cycle of birth and death, multiple lifetimes, cause and effect, karma, all of that, can then lead to this idea that, oh, you're not killing anyone. With the sword, phrases by the samurai writing things like, with the sword of non-self, kill non-self. It's like, yeesh. So non-relatedness, meaning if you can see that these, and you see, these are unmade, irreducible, uncreated, stable as a mountain peak, standing firm like a pillar. So it also gives you this kind of like, no need to have any remorse because you cannot cause harm to any of these 7 primal substances. Similar, I'm not saying that, all Zen Buddhists believe that. I'm saying how this can lead to certain ways of using religion. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, of course, is interpreted, differently. But if you're familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is about to lead his brother's army into this kind of Armageddon-like war against the evil cousins. And the evil cousins are those, they are like symbolize, everything that is bad and evil. So on this side is the force of good, on that side is the force of bad. So he has a charioteer who turns out to be God, Krishna. So Krishna, he told Krishna, he said, take me out to the middle of the battlefield. This is the good old days where people line up, on both sides. And so just him going out is safe, all are gentlemanly. And so he went out to the middle and he looked, according to the Gita, and he looked over there. And then he turned around and looked, and then he said, and then he kind of got weak. And he said to Krishna, he said to God, Krishna, take me out of here. I'm not fighting this. Krishna said, why not? He said, I see over there my cousins, my nephews, my uncles, my teachers. I look over here, my brothers, my nephews, my teacher. If I start this war, their blood is going to be on my hands. God tells him, man up. You need to fight this because this is the fight between good and evil. Then he continues to say, actually, this point. And in fact, only the body is slain, and the body is ephemeral. The divine self cannot be touched. So do it. Now, as far as I know, no Hindu king has used this to inspire his army. But these ideas, are powerful ideas. That it's a legitimate form of kind of understanding of why things happen. And here is saying, look, they are unrelated. In fact, our problems start when we relate them. Our problems start when we say, oh, this is Elise, that's Zechariah, that's Padme. No, just see them as the 7 primal substances temporarily constituted in this person. And relinquish that, then you'll be free. Buddha rejected that, actually. See, you can see how these ideas that sometimes get passed off as what the Buddha taught, Buddha actually criticized. So we've reached 5 o'clock, and I don't think I should continue with the other 2. If you can come tomorrow, we will continue. If you cannot, at some point on our podcast the recordings for tomorrow and for next Saturday will become available. So before we actually leave, any questions or comments of what we have looked at so far?
It feels like you've torn everything down. Starting all over.
Yes, that's the cliffhanger. But what did the Buddha say? Yes, Jim.
It would seem that Buddha would not have come along in any other culture, though, because there was no preliminary karma talk anywhere in the world, right? Except in India.
Then he would just begin by talking about karma. You know, he has an understanding of, like, you know, the significance of action and the consequences of action. So I get what you're saying. I think, like, if you place him in a Greek context, you know, I think it won't be too hard, because it's still asking about the question of why things happen. Yeah, and you will see, you know, tomorrow and next week how the Buddha's approach to all of this, at least in his teachings, in his arguments, I have not seen him in these early sources, at least, ever saying, "Trust me, I have seen it." Yeah, he's never used that as an answer. "Trust me, I have seen it." Instead, he would engage in this, like, does this make sense? Well, if you say this, wouldn't the consequence of that be that? And so one of the things about karma that we'll learn, his view of karma, is, so there's this thing that is repeated. I think, again, it's in the context that this statement is made, it probably fell within the Buddhist range of understanding, but then the way that it is repeated ad nauseum and then created into memes and posted on Facebook, then it kind of has its life of its own, and then it gets kind of misinterpreted. So I'm sure you have come across this saying, which, you know, I think many Buddhist teachers will use too. But again, it cannot be yanked out of a broader context, which is what we're trying to get to understand, which is this statement. If you want to know what your past was like, look at right now. Look at what you're experiencing now. And if you want to know what your future is like, look at what you're doing now. Right? The general contours of that statement, the Buddha would accept. But not if it leads to the idea that whatever I experience now is a sum total of everything that has happened. And whatever I do now will exactly dictate what's going to happen. No. He says that you have misunderstood. And the other thing also that he would point out is problematic is the idea that all that matters is the here and now. That doing, like acting skillfully, meaning acting virtuously, its fruit is to be experienced in the here and now. And likewise, acting unskillfully, its fruits is to be experienced only in the here and now. He rejected that. Very interesting. He said no. He said that's too limiting. And it's very interesting. He gives the example. He says, look at some of the rich people around us and look at what they're doing. And if you think cause and effect is limited to the here and now, then you're going to have the conclusion
bad actions bring great wealth.
yes. Oh my God, right now in full focus. bad actions bring great power and wealth. If you limit it to just the here and now of what you can see, that is a consequence. And he says, no, you have to have a bigger picture. You have to keep a bigger context. And does it mean that you need to then sort of have faith? That's when the Buddha says, yes. But see, this faith is not based on, just trust me, but this faith is based on an intelligent choice. That I will live a better life for me and for everyone when I don't just think in terms of cause and effect limited to here and now. It's like it's imperative that I believe that there is future ripening not limited to this life. As a strategy. So my parting words, in case you don't come, you cannot come tomorrow, or is this. Not just about karma. I believe that everything that the Buddha taught, that we want to learn about, that we want to relate with, we should not relate to anything that he has taught as capital T truths. As Buddhist myself, I can say that I believe that what he taught is based on what he directly understood and realized, which is capital T truth. That indeed he did. He did come face to face with capital T truth. But that does not mean that we are skillful if we relate to what he taught us as capital T truth. Because if we relate to what he has taught as capital T truths, then we are just like, holding on to medicine and not taking medicine. And thinking that, having that medicine will protect us from suffering. Or we might kind of like sign on to the Buddhist project, but not transform our own lives. So we should not relate to what he has taught as capital T truths. We should relate to what he has taught as a challenge for us to verify them. So that these truths is verified as capital T truths by ourselves. Yes, so we come with a lot of baggage from other religious traditions, which says that you have to believe that these are capital T truths. But actually, that's not how we relate to Buddha's methods. Buddha's methods and teachings are all therapeutic in nature, meaning they are to be verified. Now, of course, to verify, you have to have some trust. So I like to say, these are not just fake news or unreliable rumors. Yeah? But these are noble rumors. We talk about the Four Noble Truths. I said, no, it's the Four Noble Rumors. And it's good. We should approach it as noble rumors. So there's some trust that it's noble. Now, it only becomes truth when we verify it with our experience. Otherwise, we're just walking around with amulets and thinking that we're invincible. So we have to relate to the teachings as Four Noble Rumors, and then we verify them. And then, at that point, they may then become truths for us. And so same with this about karma. I'm not at all trying to persuade you that, this is true. But what I'm trying to do is to kind of give you, kind of this material to think about. That the Buddha saw it this way. And why? Why did he say it this way? Why did he argue this position? I think in engaging with the teachings this way, it becomes meaningful for us. Then we're not burdened by, the kind of weight of religion. Neither are we. I'm not advocating, picking and choosing in a kind of self-serving way. I've got to be very careful about that, right? The ego. And the picking and choosing that is self-serving. But I am talking about honestly relating to the teachings in a way that has the power to liberate us, to free us from confusion. And we have to do it ourselves. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Urban Dharma NC podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll consider supporting our mission to foster a deeper understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, to build meaningful community, and to integrate contemplative teachings into everyday life. We invite you to make a donation online at udharmanc.com. Thank you. May all beings benefit.